Hey everybody, and welcome to Hard Ticket, the show where we go to the movies expecting a double feature, only to find that both movies are playing at the exact same time. So now, we have a hard ticket to choose between the two. I'm Jeff Boggess.
And I'm Tristan Moore.
And I'm Joshua Grady.
So we have another special guest on the show with us today. Say hi, special guest.
Hi, how's it going?
This is Joshua Grady. Josh, why don't you give us a little introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm stationed here out in North Carolina. Been here for a little bit. I found this podcast through a Reddit thread just a couple months ago. Got to talking to you guys through that, and immediately caught my attention because I too am incredibly interested in not only film but in double features specifically. And so I guess the most relevant piece about myself is that I run a very similarly structured movie club here in North Carolina. Get a bunch of people together, sometimes 5, sometimes 25. We go through and I hand select 3 pairings, 3 double feature options for the night. We democratically vote on which option we like best. We have a good home-cooked meal, have some good discussion going with that. And so, I've noticed the last couple of years that double features have kind of been a huge part of my life. And so I feel like I kind of fit in for this episode specifically and the medium as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to have you. When you told us about your movie club, I think Tristan and I were both getting kind of jealous that we don't have one of our own, because it sounds like such a fun in-person activity, and you curate it very well, as you have let us know.
Yes, I do. I try to be as research as possible, try to bring a lot to the table, full presentation. Can sometimes go a little overboard. We've had that problem in the past, but I try to keep it to around 10-15 minutes of yapping before we start watching the movies.
Right, yeah. Well, we'll get to the yapping here. With today's matchup, Tristan, why don't you go ahead and tell us about option number A today?
Yeah, it's a nuclear apocalypse themed episode. So option number A is 1964's Fail Safe, directed by legendary director Sidney Lumet. It's a pretty simple premise. It's set during the Cold War, and during the Cold War, there are American bombing fleets that are perpetually flying around U.S. airspace, and during a routine exercise, a malfunction occurs. And one of these bombing fleets believes that they have been tasked with bombing the Soviet Union. So the rest of the film is just trying to make it so that they don't actually do that. And it's a tense drama. It stars Peter Fonda and Walter Matthau and a host of other characters. This is an ensemble cast jumping between groups of people in different locations. Not unlike, I don't know, something like Independence Day, like a Roland Emmerich, where you're just a huge ensemble cast of characters. A tense film, very tense, black and white, cut to the bone, almost no soundtrack. And it pairs very well with option number B, which Joshua, if you'll do us the honor of introducing that.
I would love to. So not just a couple months earlier, before Failsafe hit theaters, we got Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This was Stanley Kubrick, one of his first films to really get big. Obviously, he had Spartacus and Lolita before this, Paths of Glory. But this was kind of one of the bigger ones that got a lot of large mass appeal. Similarly to Failsafe, this also has a larger ensemble cast, though not as long, because Peter Sellers plays 3, almost 4 characters. It could have been significantly bigger, but it does have Peter Sellers, which was Columbia Pictures, not only their idea, but their condition on financing the film, that Peter Sellers would be in it, in no less than 4 roles, which is an interesting bit there. But it also has George C. Scott as Buck Turgidson, and then there's also legendary character actor Slim Pickens, who plays Pilot Kong, and then in addition to that, also has the first on-screen film performance by James Earl Jones. He was previously only a stage actor, and Kubrick really liked what he saw out of James Earl Jones on The Merchant of Venice. And so he's in this as well. Similar to the plot of Failsafe, this is also about U.S. bombers who are patrolling around the skies and occasionally will be sent to their failsafe points. Only this time, under the paranoid, maniacal actions of one General Ripper, sends and initiates Plan R, which sends a couple of American planes towards Russian soil to drop 20 megaton bombs. All of these bombs are retracted eventually, except for one, whose the comms are out, and there's no way to communicate with them. And it is everything that the United States and Russia can do to try to send them back. And spoiler alert, they're to no avail. And so, so that's Dr. Strangelove for you.
Man, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm pretty sure this is our first matchup on the podcast where the movies are similar enough that there actually was a lawsuit involved. And for that reason, like, we don't even need to linger on why compare these two movies, because like they came out the same year. They're about a nuclear apocalypse, basically, or trying to prevent one. They, you know, take place heavily in their respective war rooms. They're both based on books that deal with the same kind of things. Man, the history is wild too, because, you know, like, Strangelove has a prestigious reputation. A lot of people say it's their favorite Kubrick movie. It's acclaimed like 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, 4.3 on Letterboxd. Failsafe, also 4.3 on Letterboxd. It gets acclaimed, but it didn't get the tickets intentionally, because Kubrick kind of tried to bury it a little bit when he heard that it was being made and it was so similar to Strangelove. And it's just ridiculous. Like, the whole thing about like the plagiarism scheme is like, I mean, like, there's so many things that are just inevitable when you're dealing with this thing. Like, yeah, they would be in the war room. That people would make these decisions. It would be, I think the crucial difference between the two movies is that the failure that sends these planes to Russian soil in Strangelove is facilitated by a person, and in Failsafe is a mechanical error or a technical error from a computer. But they're vastly tonally different. Strangelove is a satire. Failsafe is trying to be as realistic as possible. But the plots are otherwise very similar.
If you've seen one, you've seen the other, basically. Just one is funny and one is very decidedly not funny.
Yeah. And Kubrick demanded basically that, well, Failsafe was independently funded, and then through his like pre-lawsuit, Columbia Pictures ended up buying Failsafe so that they could release it after Strangelove, because Kubrick was afraid it would affect ticket sales. And it's almost like releasing GoldenEye after like the first Austin Powers movie comes out. It's like you couldn't possibly take it seriously after that. And I think Henry Fonda even said, like, if he had seen Strangelove before he did his performance as the president in Failsafe, he would not have been able to hone in a serious performance.
I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
I wonder maybe if we can like start this dichotomy by kind of talking about the characters of each film. Dr. Strangelove, you know, there's a litany of characters. The voice of reason in the beginning is a man named Mandrake, who's an RAF soldier who is, I guess he's on some sort of I don't know. He's working with the U.S. I don't know what you'd call that. Some sort of like transfer program. And he is played by Peter Sellers, and he is opposite General Jack D. Ripper. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't tell, it's a comedy. So, and Jack D. Ripper is the one who basically sends the planes to, you know, bomb the USSR. So you start the film with this, you know, level-headed like British guy who's like assuming that this is all just like a drill or an exercise to test their readiness and everything. And it very clearly set up that Jack D. Ripper is an insane man who is convinced that the Russians are poisoning our water, and he's very concerned about our precious bodily fluids. And then you contrast that with Failsafe, and it's It's very different. You do start with a reasonable person. I think you open with a dream sequence, actually, of a matador taunting a bull. And then the general who wakes up there, his name is General Black, wakes up, and he is sweaty. He's had this recurring nightmare of the bull, and he's called into the war room as part of like a drill or whatever. And you can tell he's a reasonable person, right? He's sort of like the mandrake of the film as it's starting off. And then you quickly get introduced to Walter Matthau's character, whose name is Professor Grota Shelley? Is that right?
That's right.
Joshua?
That's right. Yep.
Professor Grota Shelley. Are they in the White House? Is that correct in the beginning?
I believe
the White
so.
House? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just sort of like entertaining some like academics and socialites, and he's basically just being like, he's being very candid and matter of fact about how like nuclear war is not only inevitable, but it's a necessity, and that it's our duty to carry it out in a responsible manner, and that the millions upon millions of people who will die, that's just the price you got to pay to destroy the communists. He's very contrasted very heavily with General Ripper, even though they essentially are sharing the same philosophy. The way they go about it is totally different.
Who is Grota Shelley based off? He's based off of a real, actual, like, nuclear scientist, right?
Or a political scientist, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but the same guy who the titular Doctor Strangelove is based off of. And I think it's interesting because, like, I don't know, I was reading a little bit about Failsafe, and people say that one of the less realistic things, like, both of these movies are still very pertinent today, I believe, but one of the less realistic things is that, like, a character like Grota Shelley is talking about nuclear war like it can be won by one side and not just like mutually assured destruction.
So you have these initial characters that kind of set up what's at stake here. You have your sort of reasonable everyman who the audience, I think, is supposed to identify with, because no reasonable, rational person wants there to be nuclear war, and much less thinks that it's like a winnable scenario for anybody. So, I mean, these movies take place in the 60s, like the height of the Cold War. And, even though there is this like massive paranoia against communism and against Russia, I think the average person would definitely find sympathy with Mandrake or General Black,
Mm-hmm.
That's when these two movies kind of diverge a little bit, because we were mentioning earlier how the bombing fleets are sent into Russia. One is sent by a person and one is sent by a mechanical error. And so you have this dichotomy between what's the flaw in this system, because both of these films are dealing with systems. And one is there's very much a human flaw in the system, which is General Ripper. You could just have a maverick general who shows up and is just like, you know what, I'm ready to take things into my own hands. I'm going to use this system to do that, and no one's going to be able to stop me against, basically insurmountable odds. The other side of it is it's inevitable that mechanically something is going to fail. There's these talk among the pilots, and I think they're in Anchorage, Alaska, before they go up in their flight, and they're talking about how the system that they use removes like the personal factor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them sort of like wistfully is like, oh, I kind of like the human factor. I like that part of my job. And you find out quickly that, well, at least I guess in Lumet's estimation, the human factor might be what would stop something like this from happening. Whereas I think Strangelove maybe is more cynical. What do you guys think? Do you think Strangelove is more cynical because it suggests that a human, just a lone human, could do something like this? And because of that, we are, no stronger than basically our weakest moral chain, or our most bulldogish general who wants to destroy the Russians.
I think that Dr. Strangelove is about as cynical as you can get. And Failsafe, though the outcome is far, I guess it's bleaker in a way. It's certainly the execution of the ending is far bleaker. Obviously, Dr. Strangelove, the inevitable nuclear fallout of the entire Earth rather than just two major cities is far more devastating. It's done in a more cheerful way, almost like it. I couldn't help but draw parallels between the end of Strangelove to the ending of like The Life of Brian, where it's like here we're witnessing something terrible and we're getting very cheerful, whatever music. But I think it just goes down to how Lumet and Kubrick viewed the same concept. And I think that they were both seeing what was going on around them. They were seeing Hiroshima, Nagasaki. They were seeing the Cuban Missile Crisis. They were even partially influenced, I believe, by the JFK assassination. We saw issues in the production for both films where they had to alter some things to be aware of that. It was an incredibly politically intense time. Politically stressful time, and there was this nuclear bomb that was held over everybody's head. And I think that when both of them took a look into what that means and how it affects humanity, they're looking at something that's so bleak and so dark as a nuclear holocaust, essentially. What Lumet does, greatly influenced by his background and his upbringing. He grew up poor. He grew up in the Great Depression. He grew up impoverished, and I think that, and he surrounded himself, not intentionally, but just by a byproduct of his upbringing, very working class, very blue collar. He saw the salt of the earth, the grit of humanity, and I think that he wanted to make something that, though very bleak, though very tense, ultimately ends with, in a way, a human victory. I think that I almost feel like you can assume that the ending of Failsafe, by the restraint and the mutual trust and the decision-making of both the premier and the president of the United States, they were able to prevent something far worse. And so, though so much of the movie is influenced by the malfunction of the machines rather than the ravings of a madman, ultimately, I do think that the humans win, because they were able to take these protocols that would lead to the death of the world, and they were able to restrain them. But Kubrick, I think, is just, he saw these things, and rather than having this warmth in his heart like Lumet does of like, well, how can the humans win in such a bleak time that we're living in? How can the humans conquer this? How can the humans overcome something so grave? I think Kubrick just gives up, and he just says, this is ridiculous. I think it was originally supposed to be, Strangelove was supposed to be as bleak and as intense as the novel that it was inspired by, Red Alert by Peter George. I think it was supposed to be this bleak, but then I think he just took a step back and he realized, oh my God, this is just insane. How I think it's just incredulousness. How could we be at this point in our existence that we're talking about the end of the world? We're talking about this nuclear fallout as though it were as common and routine as the next political election. And so I think that he just eventually just gives up. And I think in the earliest drafts of this, it was originally supposed to be the Earth was already completely destroyed, and it was two aliens who were coming down from a ship and kind of observing, well, what happened here? And so I think he just sort of unplugged from the graveness of the situation, and it's just deeply, deeply cynical. It's very satirical, very just cannot take it seriously, because if you do, I think he's just going to drive himself crazy. Well,
yeah, I think Kubrick assumes the inevitability of it within the scenario, the fictitious scenario, because of the absurdity, because you can point at Ripper as such a clear-cut reason as to why it's happening. And that is absurd. And by the end, you just have to burn it all down and embrace that, because if the system is so fucked up that this is inevitable, then the system itself has to be destroyed. Except it isn't, because these people continue on.
Yeah, maybe.
But maybe. But Failsafe, on the other hand, even though you can glean human victory from it, it has such a downbeat ending. And I think a lot of that goes into the fact that the over-reliance that humanity has put onto machines is still their fault. So even though, and they have that conversation too, where the president's talking to the, I think it's the prime minister of Russia.
The premier,
yeah. And he says something along the lines of it was nobody's fault. And the president says, we're to blame, the both of us, we let our machines get out of hand, which is so... that message right there is so resonant, specifically with mediatization.
The one quote that I want to bring to the table here in continuation of that is near the beginning of the film, when they're bringing in Knapp, they're bringing in Cassio, the congressman, they're bringing in the inventor of the machines. They're speaking about these things, and someone says, the only thing that everyone can agree on is that no one is responsible. And of course, the film ends with the president, yeah, like you're saying to the premiere, "We are responsible. This is us." And he was saying it more in the sense of, we just want to keep on passing the buck to somebody else and somebody else until we're essentially assigning all blame. We're putting all the weight, we're putting all the responsibility on the machine. And so no one's responsible, but inevitably it is through that passing the buck that we are.
Yeah, it's more downbeat because presumably most of the world has to live with this still. Like they will still go on. There's a line in the beginning of Failsafe while Grota Shelley's in the Oval Office, and he's talking about basically the farce of nuclear war and sort of talking about it in a cold intellectual way but entertaining people. And one of the people is like, "You make death an entertainment," and it's almost like Kubrick. It's like he saw that line and he was like, "Here's how I can make this mass death entertainment." Maybe because, there wouldn't be anybody left in a doomsday scenario. There's something absurd about that. Absurd about the idea of one bomb falling and then causing this cascade, this domino effect where just the entire life, like all life on planet Earth is gone. And that's why, the ending of Strangelove is just so funny because it's like, yeah, we had it coming. And so Kubrick kind of makes us the aliens. We're the aliens coming down and we're watching these his movie at least, and we're like, how did we get here? Why is this happening? Kind of have a similar effect in Failsafe, I think, where you're watching it, at least from our lenses. We're not in, the military, or we're not in the war room, and we're looking at this system that's been set up and we're seeing it across space and time, all these characters interacting. And we're like, this is an absurdity. And it's silly, except in Failsafe, it's just way more bleak because we have to live with it. This is what we actually do live with.
Well, talking about the differences in tones between these two movies, like, I think you are right, Joshua. Kubrick does just he throws up his hands. He's like, he says, "I give up." And when you give up, it's like there has to have been a fight that you give up on. When you're fighting, you have to be passionate. You have to be like, and anger fuels a lot of this passion. Anger is often how we react to politicians we disagree with, to people who support those politicians in our lives. Anger is a feeling that makes us feel justified for what we believe. It motivates us. And so that's why a satire kind of, it's anger. It paints these people, these politicians, as caricatures. They're very one note, and they're funny. They are hilarious, and Peter Sellers is amazing. But anger is also a secondary emotion. And when people are responding with anger, it's because they're masking like the primary emotion underneath of it. And, in order to process anger, you have to ask yourself where it's coming from. And it's coming from the emotion that's driving Failsafe, which is like sadness kind of, but also just like this incredulous, like, wow, the fact that this could actually happen and this is exactly how it could happen, like, maybe we should reckon with that. Let's sit with that for a little bit.
Yeah.
I've ordered a Vindicator bomber into the air from Washington. In a few minutes, it will be flying over New York City. It is carrying 2 20-megaton bombs. The moment I know that Moscow has been hit, I will order that plane to drop its bombs. It will use the Empire State Building for ground zero.
I want to know, I'm curious to know for both of you, which ending resonated with you like on a core level more, because they do kind of strike deep, I think, both of them in two very different ways. Kind of what we've been speaking, where I remember the first time I saw Failsafe, I was stunned. I couldn't speak afterwards. And just those like very quick sequential shots of New York and then just immediately frozen and blank screen, like just chills ran up my spine. And like, I couldn't breathe afterwards. And it's very real. It's very visceral. This is what it would look like. And this is a little pinpoint of human life in a concentrated city. This is what it would look like for it to suddenly end. And so that strikes really deep in a visceral way. But at the same time, the ending of Strangelove is so funny in a way that is so incredibly disturbing, which you're laughing at the end of the movie, but what you're laughing at is footage of nukes going off, and you're laughing at the absurdity of it all. And I don't know. For me personally, I don't think there's anything that hot take. There's nothing that resonates with me more with dread than a nuclear fallout. I remember my buddy and I, the first time in theaters, we saw Oppenheimer, and the ending of that movie was just, we were almost moved to tears with just almost the inevitability of it, but at the very least, such a strong possibility of these things occurring that we were just struck with that. And I can't help but feel those two emotions of this. Like, just for you both as well, like what hit you the most? Was it oh my gosh, like the absurdity of this? What timeline are we living in where this is such a almost not a certainty, but closer and closer and closer to a certainty with every coming year? Or just I'm going to show you what it looks like for human life in New York City to end. I'm going to show you right now what it's going to look like for it to all be gone. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'll say, this is like my fourth time watching Strangelove, so I'm familiar with this movie. I love it. It's one of my favorites. Probably my third or fourth favorite Kubrick. I'm a really big, 2001, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon. Love those movies. I'd never seen Failsafe before. This is my first time seeing it. This is sort of an infamous, or it's notorious a pairing. So it made sense to me to do it without even having to see Failsafe. And Joshua, you vouched for it as well. Watching Failsafe for the first time was a needling experience. Like, it was very tense, and you get to that ending, which it does feel inevitable. Like I sort of started to realize, like, maybe 10 minutes before the movie, I was like, there's only one way this actually does end, to sell the point, that the movie's kind of coming across it's that New York is going to be bombed. And like you, it happened, and I was stunned. I was, chills, like chills. And like the weird sort of like mechanical, almost soundtrack that plays as the credits roll. I believe it's the end of Failsafe. Yeah, I believe it's the end of Failsafe that has the DOD warning that's like, we want to assure the public that this would never happen, which was like an epitaph. Like, it was like, so like, you can see that it's like Ozymandias, like etched in stone in the ruins of a civilization, that warning. And the end of Strangelove for me, I mean, the ending of Strangelove himself, who is a character who kind of shows up like halfway through the movie, really, played by Peter Sellers, and he's a former German would be too generous. He's a former Nazi who's wheelchair bound, and one of his hands is just perpetually trying to throw out the Hitler salute. And at the end, he just stands up and says, Mein Führer, I can walk. And then boom, smash cut to nuclear explosions, and we'll meet again, some sunny day as Earth is illuminated by thousands of miniature nuclear suns. Like, it's amazing. It's a great ending too, for a completely different reason. Yeah, like I don't get I get excited. I get excited at that Strangelove ending, which I think is the intent. It's hard to pick which one is more resonant. Definitely, Failsafe is so much more sobering. And I've thought about it, I think, more in the past 2 days since I watched it. I rewatched Strangelove last night, and I think I've thought more about Failsafe's ending. So I long-winded way of saying, I think that's the one that really has sat with me a little bit more. And Jeff, I'm curious to hear you, because you haven't seen either one of these movies before.
No, I had never watched either of these movies before. And Doctor Strangelove's ending is like, it's inevitable from the beginning. It is the only way it can end. There's no point where you're like, it's not going to happen. I mean, everybody knows the iconic shot of General King Kong riding the bomb. Like, so it's just an inferred conclusion that the bomb gets dropped. Anyway, the ending is more iconic because the movie is more iconic. But the ending to Failsafe, I feel really stupid for this when I was watching it. But for some reason, when I was watching Failsafe, I kept thinking to myself, like, there's no way they're going to do it. There's
Calling
no
their
way.
bluff.
They're going to be fine.
You were the matador, dude. You were the matador.
Yeah. Very strange reasoning as to why I, for some reason, thought that everything was, like, somehow the world would be like, okay, I don't know. But when it happens in Failsafe, it is sobering. It is, like, haunting, and the tone of the like I froze when I heard the tone of the phone that got melted in Moscow when the bomb did hit, because it's the same tone, I believe, that General Black wakes up to from his dream. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is.
I had noticed that.
Yeah, so it's a hellish noise. The utilization of sound and of silence in Failsafe is more resonant to me, for sure. Even the room, like the actual war room in Failsafe, like it's got this droning kind of machine noise. You know, it's a computer the whole time, and it gives it character. There's lots of times where you cross cut between different locations, and anytime you're in that room, it has a character of its own, which I think is important.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like hell.
Yeah.
I don't know.
At one point, someone does say we're far enough down that maybe this is hell, right? Is that in the war room, or was that the president who said that? Yeah. But I will say the war room in Strangelove, you know, super iconic. It feels like a bomb shelter mixed with like the poker tables set up and everything. That, like, I feel like I've seen that particular room in a million cartoons. Like, it's in everything, where it's like a shadowy cabal of people sort of arguing over the world's fate. I would assume this is like the first like use of that specific type of architecture to convey that, and it's great. It definitely has a different character to it than the war room in Failsafe. But you're right, Jeff. Like the droning mechanical, the computers in the background. It's strange.
Well, yeah, the sets in Strangelove were designed by Ken Adam, who did like Dr. No, like some James Bond stuff, and apparently he was inspired by like Metropolis, that sort of like retro Hollywood style at the time. And I will say, I think part of the reason why Strangelove was so lauded when it came out was because like it feels really ahead of its time with set design like that. It is pristine. It is clean. The camera movements, the cinematography is gorgeous, by Gilbert Taylor, who also did Star Wars. So like, you know, that guy's got a reputation. Yeah. And also, of course, Kubrick's use of miniatures on the B-52s superimposed over actual flight footage. Like, it puts the stock footage of Failsafe kind of to shame a little bit if you wanted to compare them one to one. But Failsafe doesn't. Failsafe feels more of its time, and I don't think that's a knock against it, because its mechanical failure that is so pertinent to that movie is still resonant today. It's like, yeah, we've progressed, but under the hood, it all kind of functions the same way still.
There are movies that I just feel like from time to time, they grasp this like eternal thread, right? Where it's like, it does not matter when it was made. It will always be relevant to whatever time you watch it. And I think that oddly enough, beautifully enough, they both do. There is no day and age in which we are devoid of maniacal people pulling the strings and making these rash decisions. And there is no day and age in which we are exempt from the threat of mechanical failures and machine takeover and, you know, the irresponsibility of man. And so they're both so, they will both grasp onto this like eternal thread that goes in all of art. But the one point that I wanted to make, because I've done so much thinking about the set design specifically, and I think that it is so representative of the two films as a whole. Something that I love so deeply about any film, I think Lumet does this incredibly well, is, and Kubrick for that matter, is I recently watched both Dog Day Afternoon and The Shining, a Kubrick and a Lumet. And what I loved about both of them equally was that by the end of the film, I felt as though I could walk around each of those spaces with my eyes closed. And I knew them so well, and they're so well explored and so well lived in. That feeling was lost in Failsafe. And I believe it was done intentionally. Whereas in Dr. Strangelove, that feeling still resonates even more so than something like The Shining, which was designed to be confusing and designed to be a little mind-altering. But Strangelove's set is so perfect. You're right. It's so beautiful. It's so pristine and like ahead of its time. It's inspired by Metropolis, I think by Dr. Caligari a little bit, but certain sets within the film, being the war room, being the inside of the B-52 with the entire cast of crew, with King Kong, with the rest of the crew in there, and then also Jack Ripper's office.
Yes,
these are well lived in, well established sets where like I genuinely, by the end of the movie, it's like I feel like I could walk from Jack Ripper's desk and go grab the gun off the wall and then go into the bathroom and kill myself. Like I could do it all with my eyes closed. Like I know the beats, I know the steps, and you know it's so well emphasized in the B-52, like just with the lights and the switches and the coffee cups and the food wrappers. It's just like, this is a well lived in environment. This is something that like it's very human, and I think that that's representative of the film as a whole, in which Dr. Strangelove is very human. The antagonist is human, the issue is human, the sets are human, whereas something like Failsafe, you're right, like the set is a character. That war room, that hum, that droning is a character, but it is not a human one. And the phone room where Buck and the president sit in and communicate with the premier is cold and liminal and lifeless. And the plane that Colonel Grady is in is cold. It's not as well. It's just a shot, and it's just two shots. It's one on his co-pilot and one on Grady, and that's it. It's not well lived in. It is, once the men employ the machines, once the men are entered into these machines, they themselves become machines too. And I feel like the sets are sort of just like, I think Failsafe is sort of an idea that that men too become machines when they're in these spaces, and that's sort of what Colonel Grady is talking about. Like you're talking about in the billiards room in Anchorage, of just like they were looking at the pilots and they were like, look at these boys, they all look the same. They're all machines, right. They're all mechanical. It's like that's what it is. That's kind of the point. It's like nothing in these environments look human. They all look inhuman. They all look clock-like, mechanical, just wires and bolts and stuff. And I think that's amazing. I think I have to be honest with you. I never pay attention to set design. I never pay attention to what it looks like. I just know what I like and I know what I don't like. But gosh, when you pay attention to these, the set tells such a beautiful, cohesive story to the overall themes of the film. It's amazing.
Yeah, man, set design is a f***ing art, and it is lost today. It really is. Like people say in criticism of Wes Anderson today, they're like, oh, all his movies look the same. And I'm like, well, he's keeping set designers employed and nobody else is using him in Hollywood right now. So cut him some slack. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
That's right.
It does feel like Lumet is really focused really strongly on the human reactions of his characters too. Like it's a very claustrophobic movie on these like liminal sets. Like it's like these faces being squeezed and being compounded. I love that. I love that. You're right. And Lumet, he's sort of did he do theater? Did he ever direct theater? I feel like there's like a theatrical quality to his performances.
I believe he started in theater and then moved to television and then moved to film. Don't hold me to this, but I believe 12 Angry Men originally started on the stage, which was his film debut.
That makes sense.
But Lumet does have theater experience. Yeah, that's how he got his start.
That makes a lot of sense. It definitely feels like there is a very strong, not that Strangelove doesn't have amazing performances, but Kubrick, and this is part of like the kind of the reputation that Kubrick has as like kind of a cold, clinical, detached director. You're right. He is very much focused on spaces and the empty spaces around people. And Lumet is really just like, I mean, he lets those spaces breathe, but then he focuses in on the people who are in them. And it just always feels like they're being boxed in. And I like what you're saying about them becoming like machines themselves and sort of having to fight off that tension. Whereas the characters in Strangelove, they're human to a fault.
That's right. Yeah.
If Strangelove gives me like the Brazil vibe where it's like, everybody's like, not my department. They just kind of pass the buck. Whereas like to me, Lumet is focusing in so much on the theme of autonomy with Colonel Grady, who they are trying to convince not to go through with his attack. Like he could at any second be convinced or decide not to bomb Moscow, but you can't do it. That has been conditioned out of him. Even his wife screaming over the phone, begging him not to do it. Like, that can't even change his mind. And General Black at the end, when he is the person who has to drop the bomb on New York City, can't live with it because, like, even though it wasn't his call, he is the one who drops the bomb.
On his wife and children, no less. On his family who was in the city at the time. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He becomes the ghost in the machine in a way, because they're so just frightened of the possibility of the machines sort of like creating their own problems. And in a way, you know, where Black is sort of forced to do what he's doing, you know, he's following orders. He gains a consciousness within that machine and becomes that same thing. Ends up sort of being, in a way, it's like almost like a redeeming quality about his character. And he represents, I think, most of us who are watching the film, our conscience mind, you know, thinking, what would we do in that situation? Dropping a bomb on Manhattan, you know?
Yeah.
There's your Manhattan Project connection there too, which is kind of ironic. Yeah, something.
You know, Lumet draws inspiration in Failsafe he draws biblical inspiration to it. I mean, there's the biblical themes of the movie are peppered in time and time again. You know, I don't believe that it's spoken in the movie, but Buck, the translator, I think is described as like an atheist. And when the president decides, hey, we are going to bomb New York, I think like he says the Holy Mother of God or something like that, which is almost like his admission of like, I mean, there has to be something bigger than this, because this is an unbelievable thing. But I just love the interaction between the president and Black before he goes up. It's like, hey, do you remember your Old Testament? You know, like, do you remember the story of Abraham and the sacrificial lamb? It's like, this is what it is. And so, and that's kind of what I was saying before. It's like the two things that struck out to me the most in this was the set design and how that tells a story, but then the greater story being man versus machine, and Failsafe is ultimately the machine. It is the machine and how the machine can fail us. And I do think that in a way, like I said, I do think that there is kind of a good ending at the end. It's not a happy ending, but it's one that does prove to us that ultimately humanity can win over the machine when we exact our human wisdom. But in that moment though, when the president is telling Blackie to drop the bomb, you know, he does employ the code, right? He enters into the plane, he flies over New York. He is part of the code. He's part of the machine. He's following protocol, procedure. He listens to the president no matter what he is told to do. He's following his procedure. But at the same time, that action, which was not his own, it was the president's action. The president's action was deeply human. It was a sacrificial. It's sacrifice. You know, that's exactly what it is. It's the sacrifice of the 3, the 4, the 5 million just in New York alone for the existence and the life of billions. And rather than Grotescelli's approach to it, which is cold and analytical and lifeless, machine-like, Grotescelli is nothing more than a walking, talking computer. The president's one was one of reason and humanity. And so, you know, I think humanity wins at the end of Failsafe, but
at what cost?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No human being did wrong. No one is to be blamed. We're to blame, both of us. We let our machines get out of hand. Still, it was an accident. 2 great cities may be destroyed. Millions of innocent people killed. What do we say to them, Mr. Chairman? Accidents will happen. I won't accept that.
Strangelove. It begins with planes having sex. Is that?
I caught it was very phallic. It was a very phallic sequence.
And apparently, I was reading like the Wikipedia page, and I guess Kubrick got like a fan letter at some point after the film's release, and they were like, "There's a lot of like sexual undertones in your film, Mr. Kubrick," and he was like, "You're the first person who's noticed that." And I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just the times we're living in. Maybe it's, I don't know, my mind needs to get out of the gutter. But like, as soon as the movie starts, it's like, it's very sexual. And the predominant like anxiety of General Ripper is about his precious bodily fluids, but you can read that in many different ways. I made a pun in like my original Letterboxd review of the film where I was like, he's too red scared to say blood. You know, that's how, you know, taken over by the commie paranoia he is. But I really, it's like about sexual dysfunction, because he talks about, you know, at some point he had some trouble in the bedroom, and he says he's like, luckily I correctly interpreted this event as being because the communists have poisoned my body with fluoride in the drinking water, which is another kind of contemporary thing. I feel like you still hear about fluoride in drinking water being a bad thing, from the likes of like Alex Jones and stuff like that. You still have people who are like, don't drink the tap water, it's got fluoride in it. So you have this like, there's a lot of like sexuality being dealt with in Strangelove. A lot of the characters have high libidos. Buck Turgid's son, like there's obviously a very this tongue in cheek. You open with him at his like he's either like at a motel or like a bungalow or something, and it's his secretary in her undergarments, and she's sort of delivering exposition through the telephone, sort of doing what Buck and Failsafe does, except she's a beautiful woman in her underwear. And it sort of reminded me of, if you guys, are fans of Game of Thrones, the whole like sex position a thing where they're like, they have the characters deliver important, information while you're being titillated with sex or something. And it sort of reminded me of that. Turgidson is sort of like this big, wet, sopping sponge of a man who's like has a high libido and acts like a boy. Dr. Strangelove eventually proposes, we can survive this fallout if we all get into a shelter, and for every one of us, we have 10 beautiful, sexually arousing women to help repopulate the earth. And then everybody in the war room is sort of like, I guess it's not going to be that bad. I mean,
that they're straight up excited after.
Yeah,
that,
they're excited about it.
Yeah.
So sex features very prominently in Strangelove in a way that Failsafe really doesn't have, which would make sense because it is, more of a straightforward drama thriller. But it's not like sex is completely absent from Failsafe, because we open the film with General Black in bed with his wife. He gets up from his nightmare, and before he leaves to go to the war room, he has a very like tender, intimate moment with her. It's going to, ends up being the last moment he ever has with her. And you contrast that with Professor Rhoda Shelley, who picks up like a socialite who's very impressed, sexually impressed by his sort of intellectual prowess and his certainty about nuclear war, and tries to seduce him by having him drive her home, and gets pretty far until he hits her. And he says, I'm not your kind.
Yeah.
And there's like this very detached, you're talking about him being like a walking computer, this like, don't touch me, sort of a repressed thing going on there as well. Sexuality, I think, does factor into Failsafe. Maybe more accurately, love might be the better way to describe it. Although, Jeff, you and I, we were talking about Vampire's Kiss, and there's that famous scene with Peter Lowe in his therapist's office, and there's the Empire State Building in the background.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how, like, the phallus of it all and everything. And there's a very pointed shot of General Black flying to the war room, flies over Manhattan. You see the Empire State Building center shot, ends up being ground zero for the bomb later on. And, kind of tying into Strangelove sexuality again, the film ends with Slim Pickens, who's playing the pilot Kong, riding the bomb like a bull. And it's exciting. He's yipping, he's hollering, he's excited. It's an orgasmic finish. He falls and explodes. And you have this thing going on here of men who are sexually frustrated or repressed, who have the fate of the world in their hands, and they can choose to end it with an explosive finish. I mean, there are sexual undertones, especially in Strangelove, that are being played up. And I don't know, I just think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting angle for Kubrick to tackle this subject, especially.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably miss out on that stuff because the women characters actually don't feature prominently on screen much, except to either stand there in a bikini or be hit by Rhoda Shelley, which is like, the dichotomy truly of these two roles. But they figure into the plot because, it is more of a love thing in Failsafe, and it's more earnest. Failsafe is a more earnest movie, so it's only appropriate that it's more of a romantic or a familial thing, and at the end they lose that. They lose their families and their marriages, the president and Blackie both. And in Strangelove, they lose the institution of monogamy. So they lose even the idea of love. It's all about sex. It's all about each man having a harem. So
they lose the nuclear family too through the nuclear bomb. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's great.
All I'll say is, as you talk about just, like the tantalizing aspect of Strangelove, and with that, there is no shortage of excitement when watching Strangelove. It is as exciting as it gets on every front. And, I think that no character emphasizes that more than Turgidson. When he is on screen, he is commanding the screen. Not for nothing, he looks and sounds and talks exactly like Tim Robinson from I Think You Should Leave. and once you notice it, you cannot unsee how they could one-to-one put Tim Robinson in that role. And I love it, but God. He is just maniacal in its own sense. And maybe that's a greater theme, is that Strangelove does tap into the theme of mania. And in one iteration of that with Ripper, his mania, his paranoia leading to enacting Code R, Plan R. But Turgidson is just maniacal, and he's so just full of energy and like fervor, and it's just, I don't know, he's just like a loose cannon in a way. And so if you want to talk about that idea of sexual repression, frustration, look no further than Turgidson, who's just there's electricity in his veins in every single scene. And I know that was all Kubrick, because George C. Scott did not want that. He wanted to be a more straight-laced character, and Kubrick lied to him, and he put him through the ringer. It's very funny.
Thank God he did.
For real.
Yeah,
yes.
He somersaults in the war room at one point, and it's
he
amazing.
actually trips, and it was not scripted, but they kept it in the movie. He feels like a stereotype, an American stereotype that would be written from another country. Like, this is the idea. This is what we think of Americans, or like, it's that idea of the American breakfast is a plate of bacon and a gun on the table.
That's right. That's right.
He's a Boy Scout, kind of. He's like a Boy Scout, and Slim Pickens is the cowboy. Yeah, I love the. I love the idea of Tim Robinson inheriting the George C. Scott mantle, and now I'm imagining Patton being played by Tim Robinson, and I really want to see that, because that would be really funny.
It's the eyes.
See, it's the eyes.
Oh man, that's awesome. The Plan R, I don't know if this the R means anything significant. At first, when I watched Strangelove, I was like, oh, it's maybe a reference to J. R. Oppenheimer, like J. Robert, the father of the bomb. And then I was like, maybe it's a reference to Romeo, because there is sort of a star-crossed lovers thing going on between Russia and the United States, where they're both ill-fated, and the president and the premier talk to each other like an old married couple.
They do, yeah.
There is this very familiar aspect going on there as well, which I think is a lot of fun. So you could talk about the comedy of Strangelove forever. I feel like the signs and the books and stuff that you see, what is it, World Targets and Megadeth's book. That is so funny. I love the keep off the grass sign on the base while they're fighting with each other. You just have this very real, almost documentarian approach to this combat scene, and just framed in the center, you would almost just not even notice it. Just says, please keep off the grass. And it's great.
It's as absurd as it gets.
Fine, I can hear you now, Dimitri. Clear and plain and coming through fine. I'm coming through fine too, eh? Good, then. Well then, as you say, we're both coming through fine. Good. Well, it's good that you're fine and I'm fine. I agree with you. It's great to be fine.
Okay, Tristan, why don't you kick us off with your first question?
All right, so we got two films with two distinct genres. If you were remaking this premise today, what genre besides thriller or satire would you choose, and how would you do it?
I think more than anything, what I'd love to see is sort of the absurdity and maybe even the surrealism of Strangelove, just notched up to a 10. What I'd love to see in a genre shift would be true trippy animation. I think that's what I'd love to, something like Fantastic Planet, something even the Holy Mountain, while it's not fully animated, just something to really make you feel like you're tripping.
Yeah,
I think that's something I'd love to see, an animated, just as trippy as all hell version of Strangelove would be something to behold. Alternatively, or additionally, I would say for Failsafe, I think about what it would look like in, maybe we may be a little bit past this, but if they had attempted to remake Failsafe maybe 20 years ago, I could definitely see something like, as you had both spoken about a week or two ago, the Braveheart, the Patriot, the revisionist history type of thing.
Oh my
I think
God.
a version of Failsafe under Michael Bay's helm would be very interesting, in which, even though it was an American plane with an American technical malfunction, I'd love to see them spin it in a way that it's all Russia's fault and not the United States fault at all. I don't know who would play the president, but something along the lines
Mel Gibson would play the president.
I think Mel Gibson would have to play the president. And, I don't know. I think genuinely I would want to see a very revisionist history, just absolutely absurd, pro-USA, there is no fault on our own version of Failsafe. It'd be ridiculous and, could not hold a candle, but it would be a delight to watch.
that'd be awesome. The Michael Bay genre.
That's right. That's
awesome.
right.
I think John Voight would play the president, though. That's who I think Michael Bay would tap.
Wow.
John Voight
In his current state.
His current state.
Holy shit. Is Fast and Furious a genre?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Explain yourself.
Well, there's a world-ending crisis, and the government has to call on Dominic Toretto and his family in order to prevent the bomb from going off. And they're like, they're driving around in Russia to go to the spot where, I don't know.
He says, I don't have friends. I have a thermonuclear bomb.
Because, you think of like action movies and a lot of the time, like even just this year, it was Mission Impossible. Spin it like an action movie. You could definitely do that.
That's awesome. I love that.
Would you ever rule out the possibility of Dom Toretto in his car actually catching the nuclear bomb and safely delivering it to the ocean?
Is it one of those like full-size nuclear bombs, or is it just like one of the little tiny suitcase ones? Because I'm imagining like a giant, he just grabs it out of the sky.
He's done crazier things.
He has done crazier things.
Oh, we know.
They launch it and it's like parallel to the ground. It's just like moving straight forward, and the cars are like, they're right up beside it.
It's a big magnet. It sticks down and then they drive it into the Arctic or something.
Josh, why don't you go next?
Well, something in Strangelove specifically that I was so captivated by was the pure insanity of General Jack D. Ripper. If this movie were to be remade today, either the planned sequel that they had done where Terry Gilliam was supposed to direct and never panned out, or if they had done it today, I'm more interested in if they did it in today's day and age. General Jack D. Ripper, what conspiracy theory is bouncing around his mind other than the fluoridated water that would so incline him to go out and full out nuclear war with Russia? What's his North Star?
Flat Earth. It's got to be something with the flat Earth, right? He wants to send missiles over the firmament. And there are like, instead of an invading country, it's actually like demons from hell that are coming up from the other side of the wall. And so he's trying to get a preemptive strike on them because the forces of good, it's like the ultimate, he's like, the battle of good and evil is finally about to begin, or something like that.
Yeah, you can either, you take this in like one of two directions. Either it's like a conspiracy theory that like it would make no sense for him to be so upset about, like the hollow moon theory or whatever. Like he's just like, the moon's hollow, I'm gonna blow up the world. Like he's just like, for no reason. Or you take it like a more like kind of serious, where it's just like he's like a COVID vaccine conspiracy theorist or something like that, and he's just like, Russia put stuff in the COVID vaccines. So you got to take it in one of those two directions. I feel like in the spirit of Strangelove, you just have him believe in something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Hollow moon,
Nice.
all the way.
Yeah, what were you thinking?
I was definitely going to kind of lean into the former answer. Ripper talks so much about the inhumanity of the Russians, how they don't even drink water or anything like that. I was definitely going to think that it's something like the reptilian shadow government that, they're not fully human. Like, they genuinely on the side of not only dehumanizing them for the sake of the fact that they're communists, but they're not real people, and we need to eradicate them. So yeah, whether or not that also incorporates Agartha, the Hollow Earth, coming out of the Antarctica, that's up to Michael Bay to decide, but not me.
Okay, so what you could do is because he thinks they don't have human anatomy, he actually doesn't send an actual bomb. It's more of an electromagnetic weapon, but everybody thinks it's a bomb. So you still have the people freaking out. And at the end, they make their peace with it. And they're like, we actually can't wait for the world to blow up. But the weapon arrives and nothing happens because it's just like a big magnet or something like that. And that's just how the movie ends.
Again, I'd still watch that. I'd watch all of the iterations.
Okay, so I'm going to move to my first question here, which is, if the events of these two movies happened over Signal Messenger, which chat would be more likely to leak to the public? Who would leak it? And what would be the reaction?
So if it's taking place in Failsafe, there wouldn't be a person who would leak it. Like, it would leak through the app itself. It would be technology would do it. If you're talking about Strangelove, maybe it's Strangelove himself. He's pretending to be somebody else. He's trying to leak it. And something he slips into some German. He throws in a word there that kind of tips off that it was him, the former Nazi, who did it instead of the president or whatever. And he's just not able to pass it off convincingly.
I'd have to go on the side of Turgidson. He's a loose cannon. I think, I just have this idea in my mind that he's just kind of on his phone the whole time in the war room, and he's sending pictures to his girlfriend in the motel, and just, it was supposed to be for her. It was supposed to just be a picture of the war room or him or whatever, and accidentally added her to the group chat or live tweeted it or something like that. He's a loose cannon, man. He is as unpredictable as it gets. I think it'd be Turgidson. And then as far as how the public would take it, at this point, I think they just take it in stride. It's like, all right, whatever. What else is new?
Yeah. He's taking pictures, and the big board is in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the plans. Yeah, that makes the most sense to me. It would have to be Turgidson, I would think.
My next question is, which group of men would you trust with the nuclear codes? The walking red flags of Dr. Strangelove, or the repressed men of Failsafe, and why?
I would trust the men in Failsafe more, because they are not cartoon characters for the most part, and it just feels a little bit more calm. I mean, clearly neither group has their shit together, but more people do survive, supposedly, in Failsafe.
Do you think that Kong, if his wife was able to get a hold of him, do you think his wife could have convinced him not to drop the bomb?
Is Kong married? Do we think Kong is married?
Oh, hell yeah, dude, yeah.
I don't think there's a chance in hell Kong is married. I think he is.
Really?
He's a real tumbleweed kind of guy, yeah.
I feel like he just has a big pinup of Pamela Anderson in his house or something like that. So you actually get Pamela Anderson on the phone, and she's like, no, don't do it. That'd be so sexy if you didn't drop that bomb.
It's like the ending of Borat.
Honestly, kind of.
Joshua, who would you trust?
I don't know. At this point, I do think that the guys in the Failsafe war room would be able to handle the codes, and have been able to handle the codes a little bit more effectively, though they did take full responsibility that, it was inevitably their fault. But I've now seen 2 Lumet movies where Henry Fonda has taken a chaotic moment and tried his best to restore order, being this and 12 Angry Men. And I don't know, man, I trust Henry Fonda with anything, with the life of a convicted murderer, with nuclear codes. He's got my vote.
Yeah, I'd vote for him.
Heck yeah.
Hit us with your second question, Josh.
Absolutely. Has there been a movie made in the last few years that deserves a dual pairing such as this? A tense political thriller that should have had a satirizing counterpart, a black comedy that could be repackaged with a stressful edge-of-your-seat drama. Are we looking at something like this in the modern day? What's a movie that deserves like a stark counterpart, though it's the same kind of story?
I was kind of doing some research into like twin films before this, and this has like been a common thing in Hollywood since like, as far as I could see, I think the 1920s or 30s. So there have always been films, and there continue to be films that come out that are at least like narratively similar. They have like the same plot, roughly. The premise is pretty much the same. Tonally, I don't know if they get as jarring as this pair. Because you have stuff like, White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen about like the White House getting taken over, but they're both like relatively serious like action films. The Ant Bully and A Bug's Life, stuff like that. I don't know if there's anything recent that comes to mind that is this diametrically opposed. I feel like this is like a very unique situation, which is what makes it a really great subject for this podcast.
Yeah, in terms of movies that I would like to see it from, the disaster movie just isn't big anymore. I mean, we had Don't Look Up come out a few years ago, and I wasn't really a fan of that movie. And it's already like it's in this weird crossroads between trying to be a funny satire and also being like a condemnation of humanity. I think it tried unsuccessfully to kind of bridge these two movies, which is a very, very rocky bridge to try and construct. I do see it a lot more like the duality of a movie like this in different genres. There's stuff like your coming of age movies where the kids get in trouble and, but in the process of getting in trouble, they learn how to really live life. You get a little bit of a deconstruction in something like Big Time Adolescence, where the Pete Davidson character is like actually a horrible influence, and he gets the main character expelled from school, and it's different. And I figured it was overdue for a long time. Yeah, but I can't think of anything that actually exists right now that's close to this.
Joshua, did you have something in mind when you were asking?
I definitely took this in a dumber direction, in which I just picked two movies that I'd love to see a polar opposite version of it. Something of a darker, more serious nature that should be lightened up at least once is, I would have loved to have seen a comedy version of There Will Be Blood. Something that also deals with like greed and power and, exorbitant wealth and these things. And I think a comedy version of it would have been pretty ridiculous, and I think it kind of would have followed the same pathways that Strangelove does. And then I was thinking, like, what's a comedy that I love that if it had been approached the same premise with a darker, more serious tone, I thought no further than Step Brothers. I thought, rather than they're trapped together and hilarity ensues, it's more they're trapped together and they're actually legitimately trying to harm each other, kill each other, maim each other. Like, they're trying to genuinely ruin each other's lives until inevitably there's like this like very intimate, endearing, like brotherly love there. I don't know if it would have been good or not, but I think seeing them both in the same year, if there had been a twin film counterpart, would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, that would have been interesting to explore. I would love to see something like that for Anchorman. That's like the earnest rise of like somebody like a misogynist in the industry who has to confront like a female co-anchor.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to move on to my second question here. So, invent a role for Peter Sellers to play in Failsafe, and it could just be one role. No need to do 3 or 4.
Oh, my initial thought was, I do love that opening shot in the parlor room where Gottschalk is kind of just smugly talking about nuclear fallout or whatever. And I guess my joke answer would have been, I would have loved that whole parlor room with 20 people in there to have all been Peter Sellers, and there's just different shots and it's his face and it's his face. Well, what do you think about this? And he's responding to it, and he slaps himself in the car or whatever. And then it goes very serious into the rest of Failsafe. But if Peter Sellers were to actually be in Failsafe, unfortunately, I did not give that any thought. I have no idea where he'd even fit into the framework of it.
He could be the vice president, maybe. He just shows
he could
up
be,
at one
yeah.
point. Yeah. I could see him being like kind of, he's sort of like a Truman to Fonda's FDR. I can see that.
He has like a B plot where he's trying to get to the war room, but he keeps going to like the wrong room and he doesn't actually know where it is and he never shows up.
Yeah, he's just stuck in this liminal space. He's like, there's no signs anywhere.
I thought potentially you could put him, if you really want to diffuse the tension of Failsafe, you can put him in the role of the translator who's with the president. And you just hear these like big, long monologues in Russian over the phone. And then Peter Sellers says something like, he doesn't believe you, or something like that. Like something really quick. I don't know.
All right, my last question. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit. Do these films still resonate today? Why or why not? And has the nuclear narrative changed, or are we just grown accustomed to the bomb sort of lingering over us to this day? Jeff, I think earlier you were talking a lot about how you feel Failsafe especially resonates because of the technology angle.
I think it does, and I think because of the AI conversation specifically, it gets thrown around a lot, and it's very relevant because AI, nobody knows who to hold accountable for it a lot of the time, and people often just inflate artificial intelligence to human intelligence already, like it isn't just assuming the best word to say in a sequence. So I think it's incredibly relevant, Failsafe specifically. The ironic thing, though, is I think Strangelove is more accurate with this current American administration. I'm not going to lie. I think it's embarrassing to say that, like, when I was watching Failsafe, I was like, imagine being a respectable politician. Like, that to me feels like the most outlandish part of this whole exchange. And for that, I think they both are relevant in different and important and depressing ways separately.
Near the beginning of Failsafe, there was that line, the congressman and Knapp, they were both in the war room and they were upping the condition green and then yellow and red or whatever. And they're freaking out a little bit. And General Bogan says, you got nothing to worry about. This happens like 6 times a month. This happens all the time. The planes reach their fail-safes 1 in 20 times. Like, we are constantly on the brink of these things, and we're always able to rein it in. These things that to you seem like an immediate existential threat are just kind of, it's my 9 to 5, I think it resonates both of the films. If I was to grab something that holds true for both, is that at the end of the day, like, whether or not these threats that are on top of us are held over our heads by man or by machine, is it a human finger that's over the button to send the bombs, or if it's coding that will eventually evolve and deem us unworthy of life and send all the nukes themselves? In either outcome, we're human beings. We are human beings. And the people who we have elected to kind of bear these responsibilities or appoint those who bear these responsibilities are also human. And to them, this does happen. I think it kind of struck me because, like, I put myself in that situation. It's like, that happens 6 times a month. And now in this day and age, that was 60 years ago. Failsafe and Strangelove came out 60 years ago. Does it happen 6 times a month? Does it happen 6 times a day? Does it happen 6 times an hour? Like, the threat that's over our heads, whether it be nuclear or otherwise, I feel as though is constantly over our heads at any given moment. And for two reasons, I feel as though these movies just kind of resonate with us, but don't at the same time. We are, for one, completely desensitized to these things. I feel as though we've been talking about at any given moment the general Jack D. Ripper of international, like, talk about Kim Jong-un, who's like the Jack D. Ripper of North Korea. At any given moment, he's going to press the button. Fellas, we've been talking about that for 10 to 15 years. And
yeah.
At this point, the threat is existential in definition, but in our everyday lives, is it anything more than just routine as we've become desensitized to it? And I think that AI is kind of the new nuclear threat, where it's just like, what is this? How do we reckon with this? Now that we've Oppenheimer, now that I've invented the bomb, where do we go from here? with you talk about Sam Altman, you could talk about the development of these AI models. Now it's made. It was should we have? Maybe not. Could we? Yes, we could, and we did. What does that look like? We have no idea. Now we have to reckon with it. So, yes, absolutely. These movies are so resonant now. They both in two very different ways. Like Jeff, what you're talking about is like the machinery of it, the machine threat. What does this look like? But also, yes, we do have bumbling idiots sometimes that we've elected, and those have been appointed that bear immeasurable power, and we don't even know what their names are, that are down in these bunkers, who are legitimate roles, not some evil cabal. Like, they are actual legitimate roles that we don't know what they are and who they look like and whatever. Yeah. And they hold immeasurable power, not only on these operations, these standard military operations, but as we see in both these movies, they hold, under their thumb, they hold our lives, and so to think that these films and the themes that they explore are any less resonant today just cannot be true. They have aged. Yeah. They have aged depressingly gracefully. They have aged, horrifically well, and for that, they, like I said earlier, there is this eternal thread that sometimes a movie can grasp onto the eternal thread, and it will be relevant forever. My favorite movie of all time, It's a Wonderful Life, to me is one of the biggest ones that just has a grip. It's always relevant, but unfortunately, life is not always George and Mary Bailey. Sometimes it is also the General Jack D. Ripper. Sometimes it is Go to Shelley. Sometimes it is these mechanical functions. And so, does it resonate? Yes. Is that a good thing? Hell no, it's not a good thing. But here we are.
That was awesome. Yeah, awesome. And even though we don't live in the Cold War, you're right. It's grasped onto this eternal thread, and it feels like one end of that thread is like the Pandora's box sort of myth, and you always have what's in the box and who's opening the box, and both of these films are exploring, both of those functions. So yeah, I feel like we have apocalypse like always living over our head, especially in this day and age, because we live in a time of political instability, democracy eroding, climate crisis. I mean, it just has felt like part and parcel of our society for years now. When these movies came out in the 60s, it was like it hadn't even been 20 years since the atomic bomb had first been tested. We just passed the 80-year mark that passed, I think, July. So now it's slowly, there's not going to be any, it's always going to be in living memory. Like there's not going to be somebody who remembers a time when there wasn't an atomic bomb here in the next, 20 years. And that, you're right. It is a damn shame. It's scary, very scary.
Yeah, seriously. And I'll say it again. Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning just came out, or Final Reckoning. Like, it's dealing with the same shit. By the time that movie came out, it already hadn't aged as well as both of these movies, I feel like. So, are we back to you, Josh? Final question.
Yeah, this is a hard pivot from what we were talking about, but I'm just interested in the idea of, we've lived in these movies. Sometimes, some of us have seen these movies multiple times, but I'm interested in putting yourself in the shoes of one of the four major characters. And so the question I have is, if you had to take on the job of one of these four characters, Mandrake trying to reason with Ripper, President Muffley trying to reason with Dimitri, the president of the United States in Failsafe, who has no last name, trying to do everything, including reasoning with Grady over the comms, or Professor Grotescelli, who all he's doing is slapping women and smugly justifying the death of millions of people, because as is his code. That one, not so much. But if you had to put yourself in one of these positions, like, what are your own strengths and weaknesses? What role would you want to be put in that you felt as though you could do the most to help the cause of preventing nuclear fallout?
It's definitely not Grotescelli. I'll say that.
No.
Can you imagine knowing somebody who would pick Grotescelli? They're like, I think that's where I deserve to be. It's like, you probably should be a politician or something. God, it's hard. It's a hard. I feel like I might have a chance if I were like the president and I were trying to convince Grady not to drop the bomb. If I were able to get a hold of his wife and be like, you have to convince him that you're actually his wife, say something only like you two know or whatever, which, he would still maybe reason that it was coerced through torture or something. But there isn't that moment in the movie. And that would be my next step because that moment was omitted. I feel like I feel like my next pick would probably be Ripper, but like trying to reason with Ripper, but I think that's probably a lost cause. So
yeah, I would probably try to reason with Ripper, and you got to play into his delusion a little bit, which Mandrake kind of a little bit starts to just be like, okay, you're right, but not with any sense of like trying to necessarily strong arm him anywhere. Like I feel like you could play that a little bit better to try to get the code out of his head. I try my best, man. It's also a role where you're not actually like dropping bombs on people and stuff like that, so I'd feel a little more clean maybe.
Yeah,
and you're not hitting women. So
my thought as well was to Mandrake. I felt as though I could maybe, if I could be in that room, and I thought it was almost a certainty, you could easily just be like, well, he already showed all of his cards. He doesn't like torture. If I could find a way to start torturing it out of him, he's not afraid of me. I got him. But then I started thinking about I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but at a certain point, even if Mandrake had tortured the code out of Ripper, it wouldn't have even, well, I guess it would have kind of worked, but the comms on Kong's plane at some point were blown out, and so I don't know the exact sequence of events. I don't quite remember, but how early into Ripper's ramblings and talking about the essence of life would he have had to get those codes out of him before the comms on Kong's ship had been blown out? But I don't know. I agree, Jeff. I would have tried my hardest. I would have tried to get it out of him one way or another.
Yeah, I think together we could fix him.
together.
All right, my last question here, and I'm going to borrow this from our friend Scrambled. So Dr. Strangelove has been adapted into a stage play in 2024. So are there any other movies or even, like kind of cinematic TV shows that you think would make good adaptations onto the stage? And do you think it would be appropriate maybe for there to be musical versions of them?
What if they did a prequel to The Wizard of Oz about the Wicked Witch?
And where they went to school? Yeah, that'd be...
Yeah, there might be something there.
2 parts.
Joshua, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, I had a couple. None of them were great until I found the one I would actually pay to see. Obviously, you could look at like single location films as being a good one. I thought of The Lighthouse, the Robert Eggers Lighthouse. They could knock it out of the water. But honestly, unless Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe were willing to reprise their roles, I don't think they could do that. I also thought of The Banshees of Inisherin. I thought that was a simple enough plot. You could really kind of hone into the Irish music of it, a really good score. Not quite... Honestly, maybe that could make a good musical. You could really ham it up or something and make it a fun, vibrant musical with a fun ending. But I don't know. We were talking. It's nice that we were talking about this earlier about Lumet and his stage background and how Failsafe is so claustrophobic and how maybe he's employing some of his own skills from back in the day. But I thought The Truman Show would be a good one.
Ooh, yeah.
I thought that there's nothing that traps him in more than the space around him, and so the physical limitations of the stage would represent the limitations of his own life. And I just had this idea that at the end of the play, rather than walking off stage, he'd kind of just like walk off the stage and just up the aisle and like go out the exit or something like that. I think The Truman Show would make a pretty good play. I think that'd be good.
That's awesome.
Would be, yeah. I definitely think that's better than my answer. I was going to say The Thing. You do a stage version of The Thing. Make it a musical, sort of in the style of We Both Reached for the Gun, where they're like, is he the thing? Are you the thing? You just
wow, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, I don't know how you would actually do the monster effects, but I think you could do some cool stuff with puppetry there.
Oh yeah.
And at the end, the Thing could also walk off the stage into the world, and you never know who it might be. Not quite thematically potent, but
no, it's good.
Okay.
Well, we've reached the end of Hard Ticket, which means that we're going to answer the only question that actually matters on this show. And I am genuinely curious because I have no idea which one you all are going to pick. I want to know what your Hard Ticket is going to go to. I want to start with you, Joshua. This was your proposed matchup. You were very passionate about these two films. I think you told me they're at your top 50 films, these two.
Oh yeah, they most certainly are.
Which one are you going to prefer to watch?
I want to respect the nature of the question, which is if I'm at a theater, they're both starting at the same time. What am I going with? And to me, I never go to the theater alone. I always like to go with friends. And I just don't know if there's a greater joy that I could conjure up than taking a couple friends to the theater for the first time and seeing Doctor Strangelove. Fail Safe is the preferred film if I'm alone or if I'm watching it at home. But just if I have one and I'm with some buddies, it's got to be Doctor Strangelove. Just it's an electric thing to see it with a group of people, and that's got to be my pick. I have to go with that one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. It definitely, when you lean into the hypotheticals of the context of our show, it helps. I was certainly leaning towards Strangelove. I think I watched Doctor Strangelove first, and then I watched Fail Safe. At about an hour into Fail Safe, I was still kind of leaning towards Strangelove. And then that ending just gave me ironically the Kubrick stare. I had the 1,000-yard stare after that. I was like, oh my God, they just bombed New York City. I couldn't believe it. And for that reason, I'm going to give Fail Safe my hard ticket because the ending is so potent. It's so poignant. And it would be the polar opposite. I'll be walking out of the theater, Josh, and everybody coming out of my screening is just going to be quiet and somber, and everybody's going to be roaring with laughter in the theater over from Strangelove, which I do want to rewatch as well. I want to rewatch both, but my hard ticket is going to go to Fail Safe.
If I were going to guess your all's answers, I would have guessed the exact opposite of what you guys picked. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. I want to rewatch Failsafe the most right at this moment because I've only seen it once. I've been thinking about it for the past 2 days. There's a part of me, the movie has been so hyped up in my mind. And there was a part of me that I don't know, maybe wanted just a little bit more. And I think I could get that with a rewatch. But I think I had to go with Strangelove because I just think it's a funnier film. Joshua, I agree with you. I think it would be amazing to see it in a crowd full of people. A Kubrick comedy, it's such a oxymoron. And I would love to sit down in a theater and see Strangelove because it feels so huge, and I feel like it's meant for the big screen. One of my favorite movies as well. Failsafe, on rewatches, I think it's going to get up there for me. And maybe I should pick Failsafe because I want to rewatch it next. But I think if I'm rating them sort of in my own metric right now, Strangelove takes the cake. And but it is close. This is a really close matchup, and these are two amazing films.
So, Josh, thank you for joining us today and enlightening our conversation with your experience with both of these movies.
Yeah, thank you both very much for having me. It's been wonderful. It's been a great week of research and writing and watching and talking with you guys. It's been a blast.
You said you wrote 4,000 words of notes. Is that what you told me before we started recording?
Close to that, just about, yeah.
Oh man, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. But that's going to do it for us on this episode of Hard Ticket. You can follow the podcast on Blue Sky and Instagram at Hard Ticket Pod, all lowercase, all one word. You could follow me on Letterboxd at Jeff Blogus, again, all lowercase, all one word. Josh, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, you could follow me on Letterboxd as well, either Joshua Grady or JL Grady. And then also, more than anything, I love to write. I'm pretty unplugged on social media these days, but you can find me on Substack at Unfinished Trail Media. Short stories, poetry. I love to write. You can find me there too.
Yeah, Joshua's writing is actually really great. I kind of stalked on your Substack a little bit
because
it was linked on your Letterboxd. Yeah, great stuff, man.
Thank you.
Tristan.
Yeah, you can follow me on Letterboxd, Tristan M. You can also follow me on Instagram at Tristan_less. You should email the podcast, hardticketpodcast@gmail.com. We have a Discord. Joshua's part of it. We're trying to get as many people as possible. It's been our guests so far, except for maybe 1 or 2 people. So, if you want to be on the podcast, reach out to us, pitch us an episode, send us fan mail, hate mail, whatever. We'd love to hear from you.
Always. Yeah, thank you, Jared Tadlock, for designing our brand elements, keeping our podcast looking fresh. Thank you, Aaron Griffin, for mixing and mastering our theme song, sung by yours truly, in a truly awful falsetto. Next week, we have an exciting matchup. We're finally breaking into the probably biggest film franchise of all time. We're talking about Star Wars, and we're going to be doing it with our most rage-baity episode yet, The Last Jedi versus Revenge of the Sith. So stay tuned as we go over the 2 most acclaimed movies, quote unquote, in their respected trilogies. So you don't want to miss that. But until then, we will see you all at the movies.
Hard ticket at the movies. Which one will you watch? Let's decide.